Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Sunday edition of the Garden Report. Looks like we got a nice packed room already here to talk about the finals, and we're finally going to get a Mavericks perspective on this series. Kirk Henderson is here from Mavs Moneyball. I've been wanting to have you on for a while, Kirk. Great to finally have you here. A surprising series, I guess, to many here. This probably isn't the series many Celtics fans would have thought would be the finals. Going into the playoffs. But, one that I've really gotten excited about as it's become more and more apparent that it was going to happen, especially with both teams jumping out to 3-0 leads in the conference finals there. You got the Kyrie angle. You got the Porzingis angle. Looks like he's going to be good to go at some point in this series. So where does your mind go first on this series? Because I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I'm almost glad we got like a week leading up to this.
I mean, it's very much a styles makes fights kind of thing. The two teams shoot 3-pointers and 2-pointers at an almost like mirror look at things, with the Celtics taking a significant number more threes and the Mavericks taking a lot more twos, which, makes sense when you look at the team's makeup. The Mavericks have on paper a bunch of guys who can't really shoot the ball, and then Luka and Kyrie, whereas the Celtics have like 35 players that shoot 40% from three. So it's going to be a really interesting look. When I first sort of think about the series, it's like, all right, well, how did the Mavericks, who played really great defense in the playoffs, like really, really great defense in the playoffs, defend a team that can actually shoot the ball? What became clear against the Thunder really quickly is that they were a fake shooting team. Everybody's favorite internet presence, Matt Moore, HP Basketball, loves to talk about shooting variance. He's like, the Thunder got bad shots. And it's like, no, the guys who were shooting the ball weren't good. Like, they weren't good at it. It's like, I'm sorry. Like, but that's just not the thing you got Brad. Like, there's just so many guys you go through the Celtics roster where it's like, okay, well, what are the Mavericks going to do? Because a lot of their defensive game plan to date is designed to allow 3-point shots, which seems really stupid against the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, and we saw that play out in the last game these two teams played. They're really the only one that you can gather from, because obviously Dallas made all those midseason changes, bringing in Washington and sending out Grant. This is the Grant Bowl in many ways here.
Poor guy.
Unfortunately, he won't be part of this. I would have made it even more fun from a Celtics perspective.
Somebody should have him as a sideline reporter, or an alt-cast guy, just randomly wandering around between the two teams that don't particularly like him. That'd be great.
We'd be more than happy to have him here. But yeah, you mentioned the 3-point shooting. That's going to be a big thing here, obviously. The Celtics have gone to great lengths to take it away from opposing teams in the last couple of series here, and that's led to teams effectively getting great 2-point looks against them. And that's really where my mind goes first here, to just think about what this is going to look like. Like, the Mavs just get lobs off at will. Lively is just going to be flying to the rim again against them. And that's, you can say you want to live with that if you're taking away the threes from Dallas, but it's just such a great shot that they're going to get it over and over again if you let them. And, I think Porzingis coming back will help that a little bit. If you have a guy who's able to kind of drop back and, tag some of those rollers, but it's been an area of struggle for the Celtics in these playoffs. So obviously Luka is the first thing you look at from a Celtics perspective here and say, how are you going to deal with what he's doing right now? But that pick and roll game in particular, to me, I'm just fascinated to see how they're going to try to handle it.
I don't really have a good answer, because the Wolves at one point tried 8 or 9 different coverages against him, and none of them worked. It really depends on how locked in he is, which you think it's the NBA Finals. Luka Doncic ought to be locked in. But he's such an interesting player, because you look at the guy and you're like, all right, is he carrying 10 to 15 pounds more than he ought to? Is he too mad at the referees? Is he mad at Kristaps Porzingis for something that happened 4 years ago? Like, what's going on in his head? And so his level of locked in is almost the most important thing that nobody can really predict. And I think that the first thing that the Celtics should try to avoid to do at all costs is breaking and sending 2 guys at him. Yeah. If you send 2 guys at him, you have lost. Not just because Kyrie's the outlet man, but because he just makes the right read every time. Coming out of All-Star break, the Mavericks really stumbled. They lost, it was at least like 5 games in a row. We were all calling for Jason Kidd's head, so to speak, because it's like the Mavericks just made these trades. They sent out these first-round picks. They look terrible. What the heck is going on? And what teams were doing at that point in time were essentially treating Luka kind of like Steve Nash in the 2000s, where you were forcing him to score. And I know a lot of like this, forcing the scoring champ to score sounds kind of stupid, but he wants to make the highlight pass. He wants to make the right pass. So I sort of wonder if an interesting strategy would be, let's see if Luka can get his points. Let's work him into the ground, play best. You know, the Celtics have probably 5 to 6 guys that are going to see different looks on him. Throw a different guy at him every couple of possessions, see what happens. See if you can wear him down physically over the course of the game and see what happens in that regard, to where maybe the Mavericks get sloppy, they get tired, maybe you don't give up that oop. Because one of the things that was just driving me crazy against the Timberwolves is Luka wasn't shooting shots in the restricted area. He finally started taking some like 10 to 12 footers against the Wolves. He had one nice little teardrop over Rudy, but he didn't, like, the shot blocker was really, it was in his mind. And so he was, that's sort of my thought on like one way you can get him going, or at least keep him from getting going, is almost pushing him to score more. I know it sounds a little bit stupid, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and the basketball side of this is fascinating. We're going to get into a lot of this here. That's sort of where my mind goes first, but some great storylines in this series too, obviously. Before we get into some of those, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor here, Prize Picks. It is final season, and Prize Picks has an amazing offer going into the series. They are going to give you, among the players you can pick from and the stats you can pick from here, building your daily fantasy team, Jason Tatum in Game 1 on Thursday. You can pick him to score more than 0.5 points. So all he has to do is get on the board and you win, and you would hope that would be the case. Prize Picks is our official daily fantasy sports partner. You just pick 2 or more of those, and it can be that 0.5 offer that they have going right now. And you're off with your daily fantasy team here. Points, assists, rebounds. Of course, you got baseball, hockey going on right now as well. Dallas still in the mix as well for the Stanley Cup, right?
It's the only team that sucks is the Cowboys, which is really funny in the area.
Unbelievable. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to heading down to Dallas, by the way. We can talk about that in a little bit as well. But Prize Picks, use that code CLNS. Go get that Tatum offer, and they're going to give you a 100% deposit match up to $100 right now as well. Game Time, want to give a shout out to them as well, because obviously it's going to be a tough ticket to get into the finals. They have the app that's going to get you there. If you are able to find a deal for this series, it's going to be on here right up until and even after Game Time is usually when you're going to get the best deal here on Game Time. And to help you out, they're going to give you $20 off your first ticket purchase here. Just go to the Game Time app, use that code CLNS, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Of course, terms apply. So, Kirk, the biggest thing I want to ask you here, Kyrie, everybody's talking about Kyrie versus the Celtics. Drew Carter, who calls the Celtics games, said for all the talk about that, he's heard that the Mavericks are probably actually the team that has the more animosity toward Porzingis, if we're talking about the 2 players that going to face their former teams here. Obviously, a lot of injuries for Porzingis in Dallas. You're talking about him trying to get back from an injury for this series. So we'll see what he looks like, what he's able to do, if we even see him at all in this series. But where are Mavericks fans at? Where are you at on Porzingis all the years after they moved on from him here?
I think everybody's mostly okay. You know, you look at him physically, and this gets lost in the narrative discussion. He tore his meniscus against the Clippers the first time the Mavericks played the Clippers in the bubble.
Yep.
That injury. And so then the NBA season started. That was in August. The NBA season started in December. Luka was weighing like 280. Porzingis' knee was a disaster. And he really tried to get back, because this is the thing about Porzingis. He has like something like 25 lower body injuries in his time. It's really crazy if you look at the totals. But the guy always wants to play basketball. That's not a question. His body just sometimes doesn't allow for it. And I think the meniscus really impacted his ability to move and defend. The Mavericks went from being really solid at the rim to really average. He was not very good defensively. Offensively, he couldn't move around, and they had to basically run a different offense for him every couple of plays, which was a little sad. And so it went from being one of these things where Mavericks fans were mostly frustrated, but you understood why. A 7'3" guy is kind of, they call him a unicorn for a reason. He's not built to move like that. And his shooting really went to heck. Like, he was at like 29% at one point for that last season with the Mavericks, I think, from three before the trade to
Just atrocious post numbers too.
and to the point to where Rick Carlisle was saying the post is no longer a good move. And he goes to Washington and he rebuilds his body, he rebuilds the post moves, and he figures some things out, and has obviously accepted a slightly different role where he gets to sort of come in for the Celtics and be he's just a buzzsaw when things are going. He's like an added bonus. Like, the Celtics obviously haven't needed him to get to the finals, but then you throw him into the mix and it's like, okay, this is just not fair. Like, this is 5-out basketball at its sort of maximum effort. So I would say most Mavericks fans are okay with him. It's a tough situation when injuries hold a guy back. I don't think, where the Mavericks fans would get tired of him, and this is just the way he speaks. Like, he's one of the few people, like few athletes I've ever seen in media that actually says exactly what he means. Like, his quotes are very like matter of fact. There's no, Kyrie gives like soliloquies where things are buried in what he's saying just because he talks so much. Porzingis will come out and say, "Yeah, I had a bad game because I shot the ball poorly, and I'm frustrated with the coach's play calling." Nobody says stuff like that. Porzingis does, though. So that, that sort of blunt honesty, I think, rubbed people the wrong way, even though it was probably the correct approach, because the Mavericks had really high hopes when Porzingis was on the team.
Is there any what if seeing what he looks like now, or do you think it just had to be something where he moved on to a place like Washington and had to look himself in the mirror? I know he said that as well this year, that he had to reevaluate everything coming out of Dallas. So was it even going to be possible to have this version of Porzingis there, or did he have to move on and kind of have
I think
that?
he had to move on. He got traded. So he got traded from the Knicks when he was still recovering from his ACL injury. And I still think, despite the fact that Luka had kind of kicked his butt in international ball, I think that he thought he was being brought in to be the alpha and Luka was going to be the running mate.
Yeah.
And they started off 2019, 2020, 16-5. They just came out the gates like crazy. And then injuries started piling up, and they rebounded a little bit for the bubble, but there were really only flashes of how good they could have been.
What's working for Kyrie here? Because it didn't look like a seamless fit when they first made that move. And this year, it turns into a finals team, the combination between he and Luka. And obviously, that's a big conversation, like on the Celtics side, too. The Brown and Tatum thing, making it work. Two guys at the same position who kind of need the ball in their hands. In this case, kind of even more, two guys who are very ball dominant, but they've made it work. How have they done it?
So what Luka does, and this vexes Kyrie superfans to the core, because there's like a traveling pack of Kyrie Irving superfans that follow him from team to team and demand that he gets to be the one that has the ball all the time, and you should let Kyrie cook and yada yada yada. What works with Kyrie in this situation is he can have games where he is not the guy. He can have whole parts of games where he doesn't do anything other than try on defense and be a facilitator. And then all of a sudden he's a scalpel stabbing you. He has been really fun to watch because he takes the game in as it comes to him. I was not a particular proponent of the trade. I didn't want any more chaos within the team. And he has came to the Mavericks and he simply played basketball. That's what he did. He brings his family to the games now. Like, I don't even know he had a family. And he speaks like a guy who's in a different headspace mentally than he's ever been kind of anywhere professionally.
Kind of great to hear. Yeah.
Jonathan Sharks used to always tell me that guys needed to get to the tail end of their 20s, particularly like non-super duper stars needed to get to the tail end of their 20s to where they really started to figure out what they want. And as valuable as Kyrie is on the basketball court, I think his best role has been as a 1B to someone else's 1A. Because, like, let's be honest, he's 6'1" and 170 pounds. He's not a big guy. I don't care what his measurables actually say. I stood next to him. Like, he's a slight guy, and the fact that he can play NBA basketball at this level really speaks to his how impressive he is. And he's just found a place where he's comfortable. I think he's going to look to avoid saying anything or doing anything insane during these finals, because just playing basketball and going home has brought him a really contented season. The thing I will say about his play, though, is at least in the postseason, he's defending like a madman. I mean, all over the court, as hard as he can, almost every possession. And I really never would have expected that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy for him. I think it's gonna be interesting to see in Boston what the atmosphere is like. They're obviously gonna boo him. They're obviously gonna be on him. But is it something that takes over the game, takes over the series in a way that it did in that Brooklyn Boston series a couple of years ago? That's the question, I think. Like, it's gonna start in that place, I feel like. But as the series goes on and as the finals kind of take over in the championship stakes here, you do hope it kind of bumps to the back burner a little bit, because we've done this too many times at this point.
Well, I think the thing to watch is not Kyrie, but Luka. And Luka looks for offense. Like, he looks
That's what
for
I'm
things.
curious about. Like, is he going to internalize what's going on with
I
Kyrie in the
really
crowd
think he
there?
will. Like, you saw him, if you watched game 5 against the Wolves, he picked one random fan in like the third court behind the stanchion and was like, "You're dead." So I was, it's almost uncomfortable watching him do this sort of thing, because he's so thorough, and when he does, just really when he goes for it. So that's kind of my I don't know, just fan take on it in terms of what I see happening. I suspect what will happen is in Boston, at least in games 1 or 2, you'll see a little bit of a Kyrie dud. He doesn't have great games in and out when you watch when you go watch what he's done in the postseason. I mean, against the Oklahoma City Thunder, they put Jalen Williams on him, and he was, I don't want to say he was ineffective, but he played a very different game, much more facilitation of the ball. Really picked and chose his spots. Like, if I'm the Celtics, I sort of wonder if you put, even Brown on him for periods of time and just sort of attempt to blank him out, because length is what bothers Kyrie at this point in his life. Size, like the Wolves had to sort of dare Mike Conley to stick with Kyrie in the end, because they just had to keep rotating guys over to Luka, and that's when Kyrie started to eat. So I think if you're trying to blank Kyrie out of the game, you do so with some length.
Yeah, I know, and that's going to be the key with the switching there. Celtics have the wings that can switch on to those
Mm-hmm.
kind of guys, and I think it's going to be on them a lot of times to actually slow those guards if that's what they want to do.
Yep.
And of course, there's going to be the thinking too that like you can let those guys get theirs and hold everybody off too. I think you're just going to have to try everything in this series defensively, and certainly the Celtics have a lot of answers here defensively. I do want to ask you what worries you or what you're looking at on the Boston side that's going to be key for Dallas here. But first, we're just drowning in sponsors, and we love it. HelloFresh is back. One of my favorite sponsors here that we've had, and they are America's #1 meal kit for a reason. They're fun, affordable, and they make home cooking easy. Skip the trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make all your summer meals a smooth sail this summer as it begins here into June. They got farm fresh pre-portioned ingredients and the seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. It's customizable. You can adjust it to your diet. And again, it comes to the door right when you want it. Pre-portioned ingredients, menus. It really makes cooking fun, which is what I've enjoyed most about it here. And again, you can kind of pick what kind of diet specific things you want, your preferences too. You can basically build your own box here, which is key. And again, everything's sort of set out for you, laid out. They make it easy, and they even have quick and easy recipes if you're trying to get something done quick here. So go to HelloFresh.com/garden apps, and they're going to throw in free appetizers for life. They're going to throw those right in the box with your meals for however long you use HelloFresh. That's one appetizer item per box while subscription's active. Free appetizers for life at HelloFresh.com/garden apps. That's GARDENAPPS. HelloFresh.com/garden apps, America's #1 meal kit. So what are you looking at on the Boston side, Kirk, that's going to dictate whether Dallas can stay in this series and compete here and even win this series?
Well, I mean, I think Boston comes into the series as a pretty reasonable favorite. I think the
Mm-hmm.
narrative element of this and just how many dunks the Mavericks have got, and Luka being Luka and closing out a game 6 like that has sort of shifted the feel. But you don't get to where the Celtics are without, being unbelievably good. Like the point differential alone is the sort of thing to where if they were to lose in the finals, they would join like two or three other teams in NBA history that have managed to do this. So I think the Mavericks, at least on paper, are probably heavier underdogs than they ought to be. I do think the Kristaps Porzingis element of it all is pretty important. If you can get KP on the floor 25 minutes and force the Mavericks to do something different, where let's say, for example, you're bombing threes to the point to where Daniel Gafford can't play, and the Mavericks have to go much more lively, which I don't hate, but also more Maxi Kleba playing five, where you're
He's
trying.
an interesting guy in this series.
He drives me crazy. I've watched Maxi Kleber for several years, and he is a gutsy, hardworking guy who also sometimes gets the worst yips I've ever seen from a basketball player. Where he had a stretch, March of 22, where he shot like he didn't make a three for a month, and then he went into, and he made 7 threes the entire month, and then the first game he plays against the Utah Jazz in the playoffs, he hits 8 the first game. And so he's like capable of really incredible highs, but he's also capable of like gut wrenching lows. And I think it was John. So one of the Wolves beat writers pointed out that like the Mavericks sometimes use him in pick and pop situations, but teams don't care because he won't shoot. And so it's like if you're trying to go like for like and match, a 5-out basketball, your 5-out center actually has to shoot when you get those opportunities. And we're not talking once, we're talking probably 5 times, because that's the kind of shots that the Celtics defense are going to live with within the Mavericks offense. You don't want Kyrie or Luka taking it. You don't want PJ Washington taking that corner three. So if the Celtics are to push ahead in this series, I think it's because their offense dictates the Mavericks do something differently on their offensive end. It's not like the Celtics are driving into the paint recklessly anyways. I mean, what the Mavericks have done to this date is effectively say that no one is coming here into the paint. It's going to drive Celtics fans mildly crazy when you do drive into the paint. Fouls simply don't get called on the Mavericks anymore. I'm not used to it. It feels like watching that 2020 Lakers team in the bubble where Dwight Howard would just pound the crap out of everyone. And it's very I love it, don't get me wrong, but it's also just so odd. So I don't know. I'm kind of going all over the place with my answer, because I think that the Celtics have so many different options offensively that if they force the Mavericks to do something to match offense for offense, that breaks the Dallas defense, which has become their biggest strength heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's what I'm interested in too. Like, how is Dallas going to defend beyond all the stuff you said there? Boston's offense here with all the 3-point shooting, with all the different guys that they can throw, and how they're going to try to methodically attack some of those, Dallas guards there. The numbers were kind of staggering the last two time these teams played each other. I saw like a number tracking wise as high as like 80% when the Celtics shot against Luka in that game.
Sure.
It was kind of astounding. So NBA officially had them at 11 for 15. Celtics were 7 for 14 against Washington in that game, 8 for 13 against Kyrie, 7 for 12 against Lively. Like, it just goes on. And that was a red hot night for Boston, 138 points.
Yep.
But this is what they do. They don't let any weak defenders off the hook. They're just going to go with those guys over and over and over again, put them in actions. They're going to try to make Luka work here. But Dallas's defense has been much better late in the year into the playoffs. How do you kind of balance those two things out? Obviously, there's some mismatches Boston can go at here, but the Mavericks have come a long way defensively. How are they going to try to slow Boston?
I'm going to be really curious to see who matches up with who. PJ Washington has played really great wing defense. He actually struggled he struggled a bit with Karl Anthony Towns in the last round, but I'm going to be curious to see if the Mavericks put him on Tatum or Brown. But again, the Celtics offense will also force, like, they're probably going to bum hunt Luka to a certain extent. Yeah. Less so Kyrie, I think. But I really think the attacking of Luka, it makes the most sense. And Luka's just got to be ready to work. He did okay. The last 2 series, he was allowed, just based off of the matchups, was allowed to sort of float and play. They would still get him on mismatches, but it wasn't happening 4 out of, 3, 4, 5 possessions in a row. It was happening 2 out of 5. And it's a different load to lift. If Luka's expected to play, let's just say 42 minutes a game, by the end of the game, he's going to be tired. And that works against Dallas offensively as well. So it's so much of what the Dallas defense is designed to do is to take away what a team wants. But if the Celtics want 3-pointers, which is what Joe Mazzulla's talked about often enough, you don't really take away 3-pointers for a team that can field 5 guys at all times that can shoot them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Celtics can fall into a little bit of isolation here. So the pace is going to be a big thing here. Can Dallas control that pace? Can they, force stops, turnovers, especially? Dallas a little high on the turnovers in the playoffs. The Celtics have done a great job not committing them all year. They've been the number 1 team in the league with that. So, the little things in this series beyond like the big stuff here that kind of separates the Celtics, the little things like rebounding, turnovers, free throws, as you mentioned there, those are all pretty close for these teams, but the Celtics have like really dedicated to winning those across every series. And that's a big reason they've been able to separate themselves to the way they have here in this. So, I look across the board and I like Boston in the series. Like the 2 guys there in Dallas are so dangerous, and I do think the role guys complement them in such a good way that this could end up being a longer series, especially if Porzingis isn't in the mix here. But it is hard outside of Boston just imploding, and everyone keeps imagining this, but it just hasn't happened this year. Like they've only lost 2 games in a row at any given point. The playoff production plus 10.8. It's been out of this world. The path was a little easy here, so I do wonder a little bit, now that you're facing a fully healthy, fully loaded team with its stars intact, what that looks like. But I end up just thinking that looks like this series going a little longer, like 6, maybe 7 games if Porzingis isn't available, rather than Boston melting down here and losing this. As you said, like they're sizable favorites here. I think you respect the Mavs and what they're able to put up here, but there's a reason a 5 seed's never won a final series.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like the Houston Rockets and then like in the Clinton administration. Well, one in what was it 95? I don't know. It's one of those 2 years, but it's been, it's been 30 plus years since anything really mattered. I mean, this Mavericks team is very different than what they were prior. So if you're looking at any of the games from probably before March 1st, I want to just caution everybody to throw that sort of stuff out. It has shocked I told the Wolves guys, like, look, like they're going to drive you crazy and you're not going to understand how they're winning.
This series is going to be a mental challenge. And Joe said that, like, if Luka's going off, how do you deal with that? Like, do you react to that? And that's going to be the biggest challenge here by far for Boston.
Should be fun though. I mean, I think the Wolves would have gotten absolutely picked apart. Like their defense, as I saw it, was built primarily on knocking the crap out of you. Some of the stuff I saw over 5 games was really shocking for the number 1 defense for a significant portion of the regular season, if not the entire time, because it sort of wasn't real. I don't know how to explain it other than just like watching. I know Kyrie and Luka are good, but they got those guys in situations where it's like, what is going on here? There were a couple of guys short, really, if we're candid about their bench. I think the Mavericks will need to do their best to try to win some of the bench minutes between these teams. I'm cautiously worried about someone like Peyton Pritchard, like finding his go and just lighting the Mavericks on fire.
He's a big swing guy in this series.
Yeah. And it's going to drive everybody crazy when like you see Derek Jones Jr., a 10-year vet in the league who shot like 0% for most of his career. He just doesn't have a shot. All of a sudden you see him in one of these series where he goes 2 of 3 from 3 and you're like, that can't happen again. That's never going to happen again. And then it happens again. It's really, I don't want to be too ridiculous about this, but there have been some of these games where I'm like, all right, this team, just like this team's unbelievable and I can't explain it. Sometimes things just go their way. Like you talked about the alley-oops earlier. The alley-oops feel like a different version of what Steph Curry was doing to teams in 2015 and 16, where he's just bombing from down court. Like, did you see the alley-oop that sealed game 3, where Daniel Gafford just like Luka was falling over and he throws up a left-handed alley-oop over the defensive player of the year for Duncan? It's like, how does that happen?
Backbreaking. Yep,
Like,
backbreaking.
how did he even get that off? And there's like 3 plays a game like that from Luka that just, if you're rooting against him, it feels hopeless. So that's where I'm curious to see if and if everybody can kind of keep control of their emotions and not let things like not let heavy hits swing, because I think like you're going to see some really large leads in this series, and I also think you're going to see some really large leads given up. It should be a whole lot of fun. Like 6 to 7 games seems right to me. But also, I wouldn't be shocked if like you go through and the Celtics were to bomb the Mavericks like 4-1. Like, it's just basketball is like that sometimes, and I'm really looking forward to this one because it does, like, how we got here to a certain extent doesn't make sense, but it's looking like if you like basketball and like the different brands of basketball, this isn't 2 3-point shooting teams. This is going to be really fun.
No, contrast the styles. There's different types of players across the court. Those 2 Dallas bigs are a ton of fun. I love Lively, love them in the draft. And that goes back to just how surprising this is here. If you imagine this was going to happen when Dallas kind of tanked out of the playoffs last year, the Kyrie thing was, hit or miss. There was really some drama last season about whether, they'd even re-sign him or not, given how that went there. And then, you bring him back, you get that pick, you keep it in the lottery. Lively's a smash hit. Even this year, it takes a little bit to, work out, and the Grant signing doesn't really work, and you got to go back on that. So it just blows my mind that they're here. I'm happy they are. I love this series. I'm excited to go down to Dallas. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, as you mentioned. But, man, this has to just be such a shock for Mavs fans that they're here after everything they've gone through over the last
It's like
365.
I mean, I have to the morning of the finals, game 1, I have to drive to College Station, which is where Texas A&M is located, because 3 months ago I planned a vet appointment for a specialty vet appointment out there. Like, I didn't think the Mavericks would be in the finals. My wife is out of town for part of it. It's like, this is going to be, I just wasn't, why would I plan that? Like, it's the Mavericks were 26 and 23 at one point. Like, they were as mediocre as you could be, which is a step in the right direction compared to where they were at the tail end of last season. But this is not like, this is wild. It's like, it truly doesn't make sense. And I the crowd in Dallas will be really great, though ticket prices for these final games, like, they hurt me. Like,
Yep. Well, you should see Boston.
Oh, I saw some a friend of mine sent me a snapshot of potential game 7 Boston seats on the floor that were $20,000. I was like, what?
And it's interesting to see how that's going to impact the crowd too, right? Because when it gets that high, sometimes you lose a little bit of the
different
juice.
Quality, different level of fan engagement. But it's I can't wait. I'm functionally annoyed by the way that the NBA does the finals, where it's like 2 to 3 days off between every game.
I just realized that. Yeah. Especially after, like, we're going to wait 13 days for this effectively. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to get 2 days off after game 1. Mm-hmm. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm. It could be an 18-day series if it goes 7 games. 18 days.
Well, plenty of time to talk. So thank you for stopping by here, Kirk. How's the atmosphere in Dallas?
Pretty good. I mean, most of the, such an odd sports market. Dallas is probably 3rd behind the baseball team and football team. Mavericks, like, in terms of power rankings. I think everybody's pretty excited to be there, though. And we'll see where it goes. It's funny seeing people all of a sudden wearing Maverick shirts out in public. You know what I mean? So
a lot of Kyrie's, I'm sure. Well, game 1 is Thursday. Check out Mavs Moneyball as one of your sources there for some Mavs perspective through this series. Great to finally get Kirk on here, and great to finally see these 2 teams going at this level. Luka Tatum's going to be a fun thing too. The debates on both sides, everybody kind of claiming who's going to be the better player there too. That's another factor in this series as well that I'm looking forward to here. So you got something on that?
No, this is just a great matchup. You power rank players, and there's just so many fun debates. I think I've said styles make fights 4 times, and it's going to be really great to see what the 2 coaching staffs like kind of gin up. And Kidd has only won a single, like, the Mavericks have only won 1 game 1 the whole time. It's going back to 2011. It's been a real long time, and so I just hope that both teams come out swinging, because these game ones, for the Mavericks at least, for most of the playoffs, have been pretty blech. So I'm just ready to see some exciting basketball and kind of answer some of the questions that we have.
Yeah, two feisty coaches, as you mentioned it there too. I could see some fiery moments from those two in this one as well, between Kidd and Missoula there. So thank you, Kirk. Thanks for stopping by. And that is it for us here today. Appreciate you and enjoy the series, Kirk. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. And for everybody still hanging on here, want to do some service for our great sponsors, and I got the PXG hat on. We'll give them a quick shout out as well here. Sponsor we've enjoyed. Go to pxg.com/Garden Report and get great gear like this for the golf course: hats, polos, tees, everything you can need out there. Just use the code Garden Report to save at checkout. And back again, a great sponsor we've really enjoyed at different points when you're pulling your hair out, watching the Celtics team. There hasn't been as much of that lately, but some of you might still either deal with hair loss or, want to get ahead on that potentially. And that is the key there, is getting ahead on it before it even starts. And that's what Nutrafol allows you to do. Go to Nutrafol right now, and basically you're going to deal with it at some point. Like, it's just going to go, and you don't know when it's going to happen. But basically what you want to do is get ahead on it. And Nutrafol gives you great dermatologist recommended hair growth supplements, with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Thinning hair, it's different for men and women, so one size fits all approach to hair growth just doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas that are tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow based on your biology, lifestyle factors. There's a lot that goes into it. 72% of men saw more scalp coverage, and 86% of women saw improved hair growth after taking the Nutrafol Women's Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. So you get on both sides there. So get results that you can run your fingers through. For a limited time, they're offering listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go Nutrafol.com/garden. Find out why 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Go to Nutrafol.com, Nutrafol.com/garden. That's Nutrafol.com/garden. And a quick shout out as well to our other great sponsors here today. HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com/garden apps. Get those free appetizers for life in your box whenever you get them. One of my favorite sponsors we've had here. Love them. That's one free appetizer per box while your subscription's active at HelloFresh.com/garden apps. Go to the Game Time app. Use that code CLNS for $20 off your first ticket purchase over there. Of course, terms apply. And Prize Picks, they're offering a 0.5 more pick on Tatum scoring in game one on Thursday. So go over there and get that as well, and use the promo code CLNS to let them know we sent you, and get that deposit match over there. That's our show for tonight. We'll have a full series preview early this week, and then more practices leading up to game one on Tuesday and Wednesday. So stay tuned for all the shows and preview material that's just going to keep rolling. We'll get as many guests as we can up in here. Feeling good about the Celtics in this one as I dive into it, but still going to try to dig up more film, dig up more information here, and just see, could the Mavs have a chance? Could the Mavs threaten them here? And try to, give them that benefit of the doubt that I always try to here. But again, it's tough to not like what the Celtics are doing right now. Thanks one more time to Kirk Henderson, who came through here. You can find him at Kirk Serious Face on X and MavsMoneyball.com. I am Bobby Manning, and this has been a preview edition of the Garden Report.